In a world dominated by giants where media conglomerates cast colossal shadows over the airwaves, there exists a beacon of passion, determination, and unyielding spirit. That's Sports Podcast Network. We are not just another podcast network. We are the underdog striving to make our mark in a landscape dominated by big media entities. When you ask us who we are, we proudly declare, we are that Sports Podcast Network, and we are here. We are not defined by size or recognition. We are defined by the relentless pursuit of our dreams, the love for sports, and the burning desire to bring you authentic, unfiltered sports commentary. In a world where the loud roar of major networks may drown out the voices of the little guys, we stand tall, fueled by the passion that resides within each member of our team. We understand the struggles, the challenges, and the countless late nights spent perfecting our craft. We are the embodiment of the underdog spirit, the belief that hard work, dedication, and authenticity can overcome the odds stacked against us. When you choose to listen to us, you're not just supporting a podcast. You're joining a community of individuals who refuse to be confined by the limitations set by others. You become a part of a movement that celebrates the passion for sports and the belief that every voice, no matter how small, deserves to be heard. At that Sports Podcast Network, we are not afraid to be bold, to challenge the status quo, and to prove that size does not dictate impact. We may not have the resources of the giants, but what we lack in size, we make up for in heart, authenticity, and an unwavering commitment to delivering content that resonates with the true sports enthusiasts. So the next time you're searching for a sports podcast that goes beyond the mainstream, tune into that Sports Podcast Network. Embrace the underdog spirit, join the movement, and let our passion for sports inspire you to reach for your own dreams. No matter how big or small, we are not just a podcast network. We are that Sports Podcast Network, and we invite you to be a part of our journey.
Dr. Michael Hutchison has harnessed the latest in neuromuscular dentistry and impact technology to develop a mouthguard that does more than protect. It enhances. NeuroGuard Plus isn't just a mouthguard. By focusing on the jaw's physiological position, it provides an added layer of neuroprotection, significantly reducing the risk of sports-related neurological injuries. All athletes should be using a custom mouthguard designed to their bite position. NeuroGuard Plus was created as a means to maintain your physiological jaw position regardless of your bite. The appliance is designed to optimize your upper-lower jaw relationship to improve your strength, your balance, your oxygen intake, and drastically lower your chance of a concussion. Independent studies have shown that the NeuroGuard Plus will provide you with improvement to both upper and lower body strength. The same improvements were not present with a common mouthguard. Over 6,500 athletes have used the NeuroGuard Plus. Dr. Hutchison is happy to say that the amount of diagnosed concussions is 0.2%. The NeuroGuard Plus offers athletes, coaches, and parents an advantage to keep their players safe on the field. If you or your child actively participates in athletics, they need to be protected from the dangers of repetitive head trauma. Get your NeuroGuard Plus mouthguard today. Click on the link and use code ILP Sports for 10% discount on your purchase.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of the Injured List podcast, Brian Scott.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Injured List podcast. Your host, Brian Scott, here today. And without further ado, I want to introduce our next guest on the podcast. As always, we've got a great guest on today's show, Mr. Michael, or I should say, Dr. Michael Hutchinson. He's a dentist out of Michigan. Has been practicing for 30 plus years, got his education out of Loyola University in Chicago, currently practicing up in Traverse City. And he is the inventor, owner, CEO of NeuroGuard Plus Mouthguards, a kind of a unique approach to mouthguard safety in order to help prevent concussions. So we're going to bring up Dr. Hutchinson.
Hello, Brian.
There he is. How you doing, Doc? Thanks for joining us on the show here today. We are excited to have you on. We made a big announcement earlier this week that we have partnered with NeuroGuard Plus. We are a brand ambassador, so pay attention to our social media sites and our website. We will have links and discount codes where you can get your NeuroGuard Plus mouthguard. And this is a very unique product when compared to other mouthguards. And I'm going to let Dr. Hutchison get into that and the science behind it. But first, Doc, let's talk about your background. You've been practicing dentistry now for 35 plus years. How did that all start and where did it begin for you?
Well, it's a long and convoluted story, but I grew up in Ames, Iowa. My dad was an exercise physiologist, and of course, we were a big sports family. And so that was ingrained in me to just love sports. We had season tickets to every event we wanted to go to. And I grew up loving animals and wanted to be initially a veterinarian. Iowa State had the top veterinary school, and I wanted to pursue that. And I knew a person from church that was a vet student. So one day I asked him if I could go hang out with him for a day, and we went up and we did a pig surgery, which I really liked a lot. And then he said, okay, I got to go check my cows. And we went into the barn, and he put on a big long glove and lifted up the tail and put his arm all the way up to his shoulder into the cow. And I was a little shocked, and I'm like, if you want to be a small animal doctor, do you have to do that? And he goes, everybody has to do this. And I was so dejected. I went home and I told my dad, who grew up on a farm, and he had a big belly laugh on that. He thought that was so funny. And I said, what do I do now? And he goes, well, why don't you go and be a dentist? They just work 3 days a week and play golf the rest. I said, that sounds good. That's never happened in my 37 years. I play golf every once in a while, but I'm in the office full time.
Oh, yeah.
4 days a week. And we're going gangbusters. So, I decided kind of right then and there that that's what I was going to do. I was going to be a dentist, and I went, and there was a young lady dentist there in town that just got out of school, and she said I could come and observe. And so I did. I went for a day and just really liked it a lot, and just decided right then that that's what I wanted to do. And so started the pursuit. I took a 2-year hiatus to serve a church mission in Italy. But when I was over there and people were asking me what I was going to do, I just tell them I was going to be a dentist and never look back. So I went to Loyola because at school I met my wife, and she was from Chicago, and I learned quickly when mom is happy, everybody's happy. So I went to Loyola, which turned out to be the oldest traditional dental school. It was started in the 1870s, and it was just like a really great place for clinical dentistry, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do research. I just wanted to, have an office and help people have better health. And so that was great. Loyola was a great education, and I practiced in Chicago for 11 years.
Okay, wow.
Close by where my wife grew up, and right about then, in the year 1997, well, actually, a little bit before that, cosmetic dentistry had really come to the forefront, and I was very interested in that and really enjoyed artwork. And so I started to really get heavily into that. And one of the things that is important for cosmetic dentistry is that you really need to make sure people's bites are correct, because if they're not, then your beautiful smile that you just reconstructed starts breaking, and nobody really likes that, including the dentist. And so back then there was not a lot known about TMJ, which is really the embryo of what I started with NeuroGuard. Because TMJ back then was very unknown. People had headaches, migraines, grind their teeth, their joints would pop, click, jaw pain. Nobody had an answer. The treatment at the time was really more of a passive treatment, that you wore a night guard when you sleep. It was a hard plastic, similar to a mouth guard, but it was hard plastic. And what we'd say is that if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. And there's nothing else we could do. And of course, I'm just not wired that way. I was just not satisfied with that kind of, treatment for people. I think if you get to the source of the problem, you can fix the problem. So I was looking around, and there was a guy who'd been doing some monumental research on curing TMJ, and he was doing it. And so I had, at the time, the year 2000, I had 5 really painful patients. Nobody could help them. They've been to, countless doctors, and they just couldn't find relief. And I started treating them with this technique called neuromuscular dentistry. And it was based on letting your body go where it wants to go. For example, if you took your arm and you tied it up as high as you could behind your back, and then you walked around, pretty soon you would start hurting.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's not the way your arm's supposed to work. And the muscles are all torqued, and you're going to start having some pain. But if you let your arm just hang down to gravity in a restful state, that's where your arm's going to feel most comfortable. And that also includes your jaw. It turns out that everybody has their own unique physiologic jaw position that is only theirs and nobody else's. And when you put your jaw into that physiologic jaw position, your whole body functions better. And it's also protective, because you're not already torqued out of alignment, which causes you, if you receive a stimulus, that it can actually damage you more. But being in that rest position kind of protects any external forces that might fall upon you. And so it turned out that these people that I were treating, that they would report to me that they were stronger, like physically stronger, and didn't get tired when they were doing their bike rides or mowing their lawn or carrying their Christmas ornaments from the basement. They really were sincere and said, I couldn't do this before, and now I seem like I have more strength. And that, having the background that I had in sports, my sister was a 100-meter record holder in the state of Iowa. She was a 3-time state champ gymnast. Obviously, my dad's favorite child. But I immediately thought of sports. I thought, well, if I could make Mrs. Jones stronger, what would happen if I took the 0-9 Detroit Lions and they ended up in the Super Bowl? I'd be a genius. So I started testing it. I just started from scratch, really. I mean, I didn't know where to go, but uh, sure enough, local celebrity in town. He was the police chief, fire chief. His name was Ralph Sofrandini, and he loved to bench press. And he got on the USA powerlifting team at the 65-year-old category.
Okay.
And he went to the national championship, and he won a national championship. His personal best was 398 pounds.
Wow. That's
And
impressive.
that was the most he'd ever lifted. And the local paper wrote an article about him. And in that article, he said, I qualified to go to Prague, Czechoslovakia to represent the United States. And the world record is 435 pounds for a 65-year-old and older. And that is what I'm going to work for the next 6 weeks and see if I can get that. Now, me, knowing what I know about TMJ and what I was doing, it struck me like a brick. I thought, I can get him his world record right now. So I looked him up in the phone book, never met him. I called him on the phone and I said, this is Dr. Hutchison. I read your article and congratulations for winning the national championship. And I see where you want to go up from 398 to 435 and break the world record. He goes, yeah, I'm working hard. And I said, I can get you that tonight. And I've got to confess that was on pure faith on my part, because I had no evidence whatsoever except for
he laid it out there on the line.
Working with these TMJ patients. And so he's like, okay, well, what do I got to do? And I said, you just have to come in. I'll make you a quick and fast mouth guard. I've seen your smile. I know where you're at. And you go work out, and then you call me when you're done and tell me what happened. And sure enough, that was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. About 5 o'clock, I got this message on my message, and it was like, I could tell he was really excited, but I couldn't understand what he said. And so I called him back, and he started going off again. I said, slow down. I gotta understand what you're saying. And he said, I lifted 455 pounds, and I know I could do more. I know I could do more. I just didn't want to get hurt. And he said, this is amazing. And then he said, what do I do? I said, you get about 25% increase in strength. So that's going to put you about 525. So just do your normal increases and just go as far as you can.
See where it goes from there. Yeah.
So I said, but I would like, when you get to the time where you're going to go to Prague, I would like your weightlifting logs, because I want to have data, because nobody's going to believe me. And so he did, and he got up to 525, and then went over to Prague. And it's not only the amount you lift, but you have to have your arms parallel, and they have to be vertical, and everything has to be perfect. So he ended up winning the competition with a lift of 455, and he held that record until he was 75.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, I knew that I had stumbled onto something, or it came down from heaven. I don't know which, but
so you found out that it had this advantage in helping people with power and maintaining their capability to do forceful activity. At what point does this start to shift to preventing concussions?
Well, again, I thought that if I discovered a way to make you immediately stronger, at the time I surmised that it was about 25% on the average. that would be just absolutely huge for sports. I had no idea about concussions, so I set out to just get as many athletes as I could to prove of strength increase. And the next step was when my partner in dentistry had a friend from high school that played hockey, adult hockey. And in that adult hockey was a former NHL hockey player. His dad was a Hall of Famer, Whitey Stapleton, and Mike Stapleton played for the Coyotes. And he was retired, and he liked to ride, mountain bikes. So he referred me to him, and I made one for Mike, and he loved it in that. And Mike said, "Well, I know Keith Kachuk and Dallas Drake, who played for the St. Louis Blues hockey team. I can get you set up." So, long story short, I went down and met with them in Detroit at the Ritz-Carlton, and I made them both a physiologic jaw positioning mouth appliance. And then I had, at that time, it was custom, so I had to fly down there, get the information, come back and make it. Then I had to fly down there and deliver it. And when I delivered it, then they'd bring me 2 more guys. And then, the cycle just went until I got 7 players. And they had great seasons. Dallas told me that he was the first guy. He told me he had the best season of his career. And all 7 of them had no concussions. And that's when I thought, what the heck? And so I had another person who I met. He was a AAA baseball coach for Seattle Mariners, and he lived here in Traverse City. His name was Dan Roan, and he played shortstop, third base for the Cubs back when I was in dental school at Loyola. He was up here, and he coached the little Continental League in the summertime, or in the springtime. And then he was the AAA coach for Seattle Mariners. And he said, "I want you to come down and meet the team. Let's get it on the team."
Yeah.
But he just didn't do it very well. He didn't tell him I was coming. And then he just kind of walked me in and dumped me off at the team orthopedic surgeon.
Oh boy.
And he was surprised, and he thought that was really rude.
I can
And
only
he did not
imagine
wanna
the
talk to
reaction.
me. And he just blew it off and told me that all these people were superstitious, and if you told them to wear a copper wristband, they'd do it, and they'd all want to do it. And he said, "Where's your data?" And I didn't have any data, so that was kind of a bust, but it was probably one of the first and most important things I learned, and that was I had to prove it. I had to
Oh yeah.
do a concrete study to show the scientific discovery. So what I did was I went back home, and my son was going to be starting his 8th grade year of football. And I went to the coach, explained what I wanted to do. I got all the parents together, and I got there okay. And it was the second game into the season, and they'd lost both games. And the next game, I was ready to fit all the kids. So I made custom appliances. The day before the game, I got them all fitted and comfortable. And the next day, they won the game by 45 points. And they won every game, the next 6 games in a row, by more than 45 points, and won the conference. And
Sounds too good to be coincidental.
Well, it gets even better because they had no concussions.
That's great.
Which I thought, that's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
so I was talking to my orthodontist friend, and his boys played for the Catholic school across town. And so the next year, I did mouth appliances for them and my son's team. So for the next 5 years, I had 100 boys. The state champion, St. Francis Gladiators, won 5 in a row and had no concussions for 5 years. My son's team had 3 undefeated seasons and no concussions on any of those boys either. So for 100 boys, no concussions. And that's
cool.
when it took a massive right-hand turn.
Yeah.
I'd already proven strength increase, and then it was helped by Wayne State University's biomedical engineering department. They contacted me and said they wanted to study it, and they studied it with their football team, 40 of their players, and they showed a 16.8% increase in strength when your jaw is in that physiologic jaw position. And then anecdotally, their team had no concussions and went on to have the winningest record in the history of the school and went to the national D2 football championship.
Awesome.
And also their basketball team, their women's basketball, their women's hockey team, all had this technology and all had phenomenal seasons. And so they wrote a paper on the strength increase, and they tested Shock Doctor, which is still the number one mouth guard out there.
Yep.
And I'm going to get into what's the difference here in a second, but
Yep.
So Shock Doctor failed the test. They were the worst. They were worse than not having any mouth guard at all. That didn't make them very happy, but there's a really good explanation for that. But they presented that paper in the spring of that year in Limerick, Ireland, as a new discovery in performance and strength increase. And that was really pretty much proven there. And the concussion awareness, everybody was starting to really be concerned about concussions, and that's kind of what I continued on. So for 18 years, I followed teams. I gave them discounts. I got as many players, up to about 7,000 players from Pee-wee to high school to pro athletes in all different sports, and had 9 concussions out of those. Many schools had no concussions, and in particular, there was a school in California, a high school, that had 180 players in their program, and they didn't want to buy 180 for some reason, so they just bought 90 of them and gave them to their best players, and the other 90 had to fend for themselves. And it turned out huge in the favor of physiologic jaw position because there were no concussions in those 90.
I was going to say, there's your control group right there.
But there were 16 in the group that people had their own. And so I thought to myself, wow, that could cause a legal problem. Because if I was a dad that was not told about this technology,
yeah,
and my son was not chosen to have it, I think I might have been a little bit angry about that.
Yeah.
Why did you pick my son to have a concussion?
Somebody's got some explaining to do.
Yeah, I got
for sure.
But MSU's College of Human Medicine took that information along with a study I did at UAB for 6 years with their team doctor. They had no concussions, and they came out of being canceled in the NCAA to first year in a bowl game, and bowl games for the 6 years that the coach was there when he moved. the new coach fired everybody and was not interested in Power Plus. I don't know why, but back then it was called Power Plus because I started with strength increase and then concussions, but I've changed it now to NeuroGuard Plus, being concussion mitigation plus strength, because I would find that there were a lot of people who would say to me, "Oh, that's just another mouth guard. I have a mouth guard."
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. So I changed it to NeuroGuard so that people would not know what that is, and it's been great because people are like, "What's NeuroGuard?" And then I can tell them about the concussion mitigation. But that study was done, and additionally, I sent in a patent in 2009, and it was awarded in 2015 in North America and Mexico. So this technology is the key to concussion reduction. It's the missing link in preventing concussions, because if you really look at it, the concussion rate has not changed in 50 years. It's still 20%. Everything that they've done has helped, but there's a part that's missing, and that is the jaw. And if you look at any sport, you will see that the jaw is not protected. And there's where the concussions come from. If you protect the jaw, then you get 0.2% concussion rate. And there you go.
Can you explain the physiologic jaw position? How does one know whether or not they have that position with their TMJ?
Well, our body runs on physiology, our cell metabolism, our oxygen intake, and also our nerve function. If our nerve does not tell our muscle to do anything, it won't do anything. You know, person who's paralyzed has a nerve problem that cannot get any information to the muscles. So therefore, they don't work. So in a sense, that's what's happening with the jaw, because through genetics, nutrition, and all the things that we do growing up to our bodies and what we eat and our genes that mixed, and sometimes we reach our genetic potential and sometimes we don't, and that messes up our balance, our structure. Maybe we're bottom heavy and not top heavy, or not equal because of our genes. All these things that go into it, but one of the things that is pretty predictable is the way that our teeth fit together and the way that the lower jaw hinges and articulates with the upper jaw. And as you know, the upper jaw is not movable, it's solid. But the lower jaw is functioned by muscles and tendons. It's not actually touching the bone. And so all of those muscles have to work in their designed direction, or you have problems. So if there's some misalignment of your jaw muscles, if your bones aren't the same size on each side, if your teeth aren't in the right place, or you're missing teeth, so that you end up, let's say you're missing your molars, and so when you contract, you have like a teeter-totter effect. All those things collapse on the nerves, pinch the muscles, close your airway, diminish your oxygen intake, and put your jaw in jeopardy. All of those things, and you don't even know this because you just were born and you just grew up, and that's every day of your life. You are who you were, you know. So what we found out is that the most passive position of the jaw joint or ball of the socket and the socket is the physiologic rest position, where the space between the ball and the socket is equal all the way around. And so there's no pressure on any muscles or nerves or anything like that. And if you get hit in the face, because there's that equal distance around the socket, the G-force or acceleration enough to cause a concussion or a TBI or a brain injury cannot jump across that gap and injure your brain. It has to go elsewhere, away from your brain. That's number one. Number two is because you increase your strength by, let's say, 17%, that means your muscles in your neck are 17% stronger immediately. And I don't think there's a scientist or expert out there that would disagree that a stronger neck will produce less whiplash, which is what everybody thinks about when they think about a concussion. It's only caused by your brain jiggling around inside your skull, which is not exactly 100% everything. We know this because military blast training creates a lot of concussions, and just the mere energy of the blast can injure your brain. And so we know that similar kind of energy can do that. It comes from other sources. But so what happens is if our teeth are too short, we're going to overclose our jaw and it's going to roll back and touch the skull in the back. Then when you get hit like an electric current, it's just going to go right up your jawbone to the cradle of the skull, which is the sphenoid bone, which your jaw articulates with. And so this butterfly bone holds your brain. It sits right on top of it. And then, bam, you get a hit. So same thing happens if your teeth are too tall. It rolls up and touches the front of the socket. And again, you have this electric metaphor of current that takes it up to the brain and causes a brain injury, depending on how much force it is, which we really don't know the exact amount of Newton centimeters that causes a concussion. I've seen reports and studies anywhere from 800 down to 80. That's a pretty wide range.
Yes, it is.
The mouth guards with sensors is a great idea, and everybody gets excited about that. But that's not a preventive measure per se. That's a study mechanism. That's a way that a doctor can study how much force. You're still going to get a concussion.
Yeah.
And we say, oh, sorry about that, but thanks for the information.
Exactly. It's a scientific tool to gather some more info. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we have 10,800 concussions in the United States every day. And I just saw a figure that every year there's 50 million concussions in the world. So if you divide that by 365, that's 137,000 concussions that happen today, Brian.
Yep.
And so if you look at the rate of concussions, and what's interesting is that men have more concussions, but women have a higher percentage per capita of concussions because of their neck structure, and their brain is slightly different than ours in makeup, and so it gets injured easier, and it takes them longer to recover from it. So these are things that go on every day and never change for the last 60 years. And what's really scary is that if you play, let's say you're playing 8th grade football, you got 6 years before your senior year is through. So 20% is going to give you one concussion sometime in that 6 years. Every single person, if they don't have their jaw in that right position. So the truth of the matter is, the mouth guards that all your listeners and their kids are wearing is 74 years old, made in the 1950s, and is the same as it was then as it is now. And so is the concussion rate. It's the same.
It's
Nothing's
crazy to realize
changed.
that.
The helmets have changed. They put face
Yeah.
masks on. They got
Shoulder
padded chin
pads.
straps. They got cages. They got air helmets. They got pillow heads over the helmets. And
Yep.
they forget or ignore this part.
Yeah.
And they make it worse with a chin strap that pushes your jaw up
Out of
against the
alignment.
skull.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes across the field and tackles you, hits you in the ear hole, and down you go for 2 weeks with a concussion.
Crazy.
Now that we're learning that one concussion can haunt you your whole life. Most of the time, people recover and can live a good life, but you don't know. You just do not know if it's going to be you or not.
Right.
And the monetary studies have been shown is it's going to cost you $100,000 over a lifetime from the effects of a concussion. So this is
nothing that has come out recently.
Important.
Yeah, nothing that has come out recently with concussion literature and research has been positive. CTE, the big kind of topic of conversation going on the last several years, getting a lot of pushback by the NFL on some of those research studies, which have proven that there's, a cumulative effect to concussions. It does have a long-lasting effect on the mental health and psyche of these people who are having to undergo it. We've seen it time and time again. It's been proven. And yet there's such a hesitancy or ignorance to, I don't know what you want to call it, to change. And it just doesn't make sense.
It's just a historical tradition. We don't like to change.
Could you imagine if the rate of dying on the OR table was 20% for a simple tonsil procedure nowadays, or an appendectomy when you have your appendix removed? Could you imagine? I mean, that's like 1 in every 5 people who go in to have their appendix removed would not make it out of the OR table. Could you imagine if the numbers were that high for stuff like that? Yet we're accepting of a 20% concussion rate. I just don't get it.
And for me, if my failure rate with dentistry was 1 in 5, I don't know. I'd probably go try to do something else.
I think people would make you do something else.
It's that's the thing. In my work is people always they joke about dentists having the highest concussion or highest suicide rate, which has never been really proven, but maybe way back in the 60s and 50s and 40s, because dentistry was painful.
Yeah.
And hurting people every day to try to help them could weigh heavily on you. But nowadays, dentistry should never hurt ever. And so that's just not the case now. But if I always tell people, if my work was such a failure, I just wouldn't be able to handle that every day. I'd go do something else. I mean, yes, this procedure is 99% successful. And so that's the thing with concussions and with mouth guards. Seems like people they have a lot of myths about what they think a mouth guard does, and there's only one function 74 years ago, and that was Notre Dame players were breaking their teeth on the football field without having any protection. So the American Dental Association came up with a mouth guard or a tooth guard to keep you from banging your teeth together. And it worked. It worked great.
For that and that only.
The problem is not knowing physiologic jaw position and the position of the joint. If you make that thing too thick, you're going to roll up and touch up here and you get concussions. If you make it too thin, it's going to roll back and touch the back and you have concussions. So that's why the concussion rate just stayed the same. And the only way that you could, with the current mouth guard, that you could change that is if you needed a certain amount of opening for your physiologic jaw position, and you happen to get by a mouth guard that equals the same amount of thickness that you need, you
Purely
might
by
get
chance.
you might get some by chance, but you don't know if
Right.
you're going to do that. That's
It's
the
just pure
beauty of
luck. Yeah.
knowing physiologic jaw position. Now you can actually put yourself in that position, and you can be like Daniel Sorensen, who's NeuroGuard's poster child. He went the whole NeuroGuard Plus. When he graduated from Brigham Young University, my brother gave him my prototype. He said, "You should wear this." And he went to Kansas City as a non-drafted free agent practice player. That's like, yeah, you can come and try out, but we have nothing for you. But he went, and he was just playing phenomenally. He could run faster, jump higher, and pretty soon he started. He was on the practice squad, and then pretty soon they started putting him in special teams, and he was tearing it up, making tackles right and left. So they started putting him in at nickel situations at free safety, and again he was tearing it up, and they were calling him Dirty Dan. And so he got after a couple of years, he got a 4-year, $16 million contract. He played in 2 Super Bowls, played free safety, one of the most dangerous positions you could play. And for 9 years in the NFL, he played without a concussion. And he actually texted me and said, "Your mouth guard is so phenomenal that I feel invincible with this." And it was true, because he was a really hard hitter. In 1 year, he was a very, very nice and kind person. He never tried to hurt anybody. That's just the way he played. It was all out or not out,
I mean, you kind of have to in that league.
Yeah, so Lindsey, that was on the Denver Broncos, a running back, he tackled him, and Lindsey got a concussion, and they fined Daniel for a head-to-head hit. Daniel didn't have a concussion, but Lindsey did. And then I don't know if you remember, but the AFC Championship with the Browns and the Chiefs, and there were like 2 minutes left. Chiefs were up by 3 points or something like that. And Baker Mayfield threw a pass to Higgins, and he was running down the sideline. And about the 1 yard line, Daniel came across and hit him in his ear hole. And he lost all muscle function and fumbled the ball out of the end zone. It was a touchback.
Yep.
And the Chiefs went on to the Super Bowl. And Daniel popped up and went back in, no concussion, and Higgins was out.
Yep. I do remember that play.
That is anecdotal evidence that a player can play for 9 years in the NFL with no concussions at free safety, and can help win Super Bowls with protection.
I majored, my master's degree is in kinesiology, so you don't really have to explain it much to me to sell me on the idea and the thought process behind it and the physiologic benefits of the ideal jaw position. It goes hand in hand with a lot of other joints that we often work with in orthopedic surgery. What I do, I mean, the principles are very much the same, slightly different based on the type of joint you're dealing with, but it all makes sense to me. So hopefully word gets out to people out there to give it a try at the very least, because the traditional mouth guards have not worked. Half the time they're uncomfortable to wear. You see a lot of kids and professionals alike who often have them way oversized. They don't use them. They spit them out because they're so uncomfortable. You've been able to create a mouth guard that people can actually mold it at home as well and put themselves into that physiologic position. Can you explain a little bit how that works?
Yeah, the only way that you can do it is to use your autonomic nervous system. And that is, when it comes to your mouth, that's your swallowing mechanism. If I want to reach out and grab a glass, when we're our age, you almost don't even think about it. You kind of do, and but when it comes to swallowing, you don't even think about it. You just do it. And when you do that, all the muscles in that region, the 136 muscles from your shoulders to the top of your head, they all have to do a function for you to swallow. And you have to, in an ideal situation, when you swallow, you should be bracing against your teeth, the muscles that do the work, that peristaltic action, have to brace against something. And usually when it's an ideal perfect bite, you close your teeth, and that's the backdrop to your muscles contraction as well as relaxation. But when you don't have the right jaw position, your teeth are in the right place, you can't put your jaw in that position. So you have to swallow to make that happen. So when you fit a mouth guard, it has to be on the lower arch, and you have to swallow into the warm plastic. You don't have to consciously try to swallow into it. All you do is just swallow 5 times, and the muscle function guides you right into your physiologic jaw position. So what that means is that now when you're going to go out and play your sport, you increase your circulation, you increase your salivation, you have to swallow more. So you're breathing heavier, so your mouth's getting dry, so you salivate more. And so normally just sitting around, you swallow 2,500 times a day. When you're playing football or running a marathon, you're swallowing double, triple that. So every time you swallow into your bad jaw position, it's like you have a rubber band around your waist and somebody pulls you back. You're like got brakes on because your muscles can't function at that diminished function, whether it be 25%. The most I've ever seen was a guy who had a 62% deficiency, and he was a moose of a guy. Unbelievable how much strength increase he got when I put him in his physiologic jaw position. But I mean, if you're an elite athlete and you can increase your strength output by 17%, you are going to annihilate your competition.
Yeah, that's at that level. Those are huge increases. It
Yeah.
might sound like small numbers to some, but when you're already at that elite level, that's a big jump.
Absolutely. So that's the patent that I filed, is that physiologic jaw position, and it's, as you know, it's just a body mechanism that you can't obtain it any other way. The only way you can do it, like the only way your heart beats, is that certain way. The only way you can get physiologic jaw position is by swallowing. And
your
so
mouth guard is worn on the bottom.
it's on the bottom.
Converse to many others on the market, which are either on both upper and lower teeth or just on the top. And what's the rationale? What's the science or theory behind that?
Well, it goes back to the knowledge of dentistry 60, 70 years ago. They determined, it's called occlusion, how your teeth fit together and interdigitate like gears. Your teeth aren't flat. They have cusps and they have grooves. And the upper tongue side cusp fits in the lower groove, and the buccal cusp or the cheek cusp of the upper wraps over the buccal or mouth cusp of the lower. So it's like a gear. So when that's disrupted, that's when things start to go wrong. So what they thought back then is that ideal bite, your upper jaw overlapped your lower teeth. So your lower teeth were naturally in a perfect bite. Of course, there's underbites, there's buck teeth, overbites, there's open bites, there's over closed bites. all kinds of bites that people get that are detrimental. A perfect bite is 1 millimeter space between your teeth and 1 millimeter overlap. That's a perfect bite. So that person's physiologic jaw position is right on the money. So you don't want to disrupt that jaw position by making a mouth guard that's way too thick, thus rolling your jaw forward and disrupting the nerve information. So those people need a really, really thin mouth guard, just enough to keep them from banging their teeth together and breaking them. But they called it the leading arch. So if you took off and you ran into a wall, they thought the most protection and the first impact would be, logically thinking, would be your upper teeth. So that's why they put it on the upper. Now, I get this question all the time. And to me, as a neuromuscular dentist and a dental professional, it's what you would call a, forgive me for saying this, a stupid question. And the question is, if you put the mouth guard on the lower teeth, what's going to protect the upper teeth? And I say, if you put the mouth guard on the upper teeth, what's going to protect the lower teeth? Right? Because that's not what it was ever designed for.
Right.
And that's not what it can do. If you go on the American Dental website, you'll see that mouth guards don't have enough strength, and mine doesn't either, to resist a force so great that it can lift your tooth out of your jaw. And knowing what I know about extracting teeth, that takes a lot of force. I've broken into a sweat taking out a tooth that was just locked in there, and I took all the strength I could get. No, I did not put my knee on your chest. But what you're doing is expanding the bone. And so when you get a force, let's say a hockey puck gets shot right at you, hits you in the mouth, that's enough force to knock your tooth out if it doesn't break previously to that. But a mouth guard is not going to protect you for that. Again, a mouth guard was, and that's why they put it on the upper, because they thought that it would resist breaking from the impact, the teeth. So then you might think, well, then I should wear a pacifier because then it protects the upper and lower teeth. But again, not the amount of force that it takes to knock a tooth out. It's not going to protect that. And the problem is with that is that it's too thick and it will roll your jaw up against the skull. And I say it's the worst mouth guard that you could ever wear for that reason. And you can't breathe. You lower your oxygen intake drastically when you're wearing. You see these guys wearing that and they spit them out. As soon as the play starts, they spit it out because they can't breathe. So that's, upper, lower, any kind of mouth guard that you have is really, and I'm going to be bold, it's worthless except for keeping you from breaking your teeth.
Yep.
It makes you weaker and it makes you more susceptible to a concussion, except for your jaw being put in its physiologic jaw position and with an appliance that always lets you know where it's at. The whole game, whatever you do, you always go there. When you swallow, you're there. You never go out of it. Your performance goes way up. And one thing I was going to tell you that was really interesting when I did all the congruent studies, there was a study done at Notre Dame in 1983 with their football players. And there was a mouth appliance back then. They kind of stole from seeing what people from Russia were doing in the Olympics, and they thought, well, hey, they're just doing so good, and their mouth guards are on the lower teeth, and they called it a mora, mandibular repositioning appliance. They didn't know how it worked, and they didn't know how to actually make physiologic jaw position, but you can get a lot luckier when you do it that way as opposed to the upper teeth. So they did this for these football players, and their conclusion was they had more strength, they had more stamina. In other words, they stayed in the game longer, and less knee injuries. And that perplexed me for a long time. And then as I did this, I thought, okay, physiologic jaw position makes you balance your body. Better balance is less caustic to your body. And when your legs, knees, hips, arms, everything is lined up in its perfect vector, if it got an impact, it would be able to resist that impact more than if you were running bow-legged because of your messed up physiology, right?
Yep.
So I'm not an orthopedic physician, but it just sort of made sense that because I do balance studies with people too, with physiologic jaw position, and there's a stark difference in balance improvement when you're in physiologic jaw position.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you don't have to sell me, Doc. I understand it completely, and I'm on board. And this has been a great lesson for all my fans and viewers of the podcast and listeners of the podcast. Because you dispelled a lot of myths about mouth guards. You've given us a lot of science behind what works and what doesn't. The thought process behind your product and how it works. And I'm excited to be working with you guys. NeuroGuard Plus. You can see I have the discount code down below. So if you guys are interested in trying Dr. Hutchison's NeuroGuard Plus Mouthguard, take a look. I'll have all of the links to the website so you can order them using the discount code. And I'm currently in discussions with a lot of former professional healthcare providers and athletic trainers who I've worked closely with over the years, who I know have not come across this product, and I know they could probably use it to help their athletes prevent concussion injuries and hopefully improve their power as well and be more successful in the athletic field. So I'm excited to be able to work with NeuroGuard Plus Mouthguards moving forward here. So Dr. Hutchinson, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to go over everything with us. If anyone has any questions, if they want to reach out to you, I'll make sure I have all of Dr. Hutchison's contact information in the show notes. Anywhere else they can find you, Dr. Hutchison? What other kind of projects you're working on? What other kind of things you got going right now?
Well, we're just working with the Army. We've in negotiations and meetings with them. There's a pretty interesting Baseball Parks of America down in Branson, Missouri. They have 5 vintage baseball parks. They get 10,000 visitors a week down there, and NeuroGuard Plus is a must-have in their pro shop. I can't say with enough earnestness that moms and dads out there, if you send your kid out to play their sport, and it doesn't have to be hockey, football, doesn't have to be field hockey, lacrosse. It can be wrestling, soccer, girls basketball, softball, any sport that you send your kid out to play. If they have physiologic jaw position, if they have NeuroGuard Plus, there's a 99.8% chance that they will not get a concussion. And that's the best that you can do right now in this day and age. If you go with the conventional, in 5 years, they're going to have a concussion. That's the odds. And nobody needs a concussion. It's tragic. So I'm really passionate about it, and we need to step up. We wouldn't go out on the field without a face mask or any shin guards or any other protective equipment, but we go out there Well, protecting our jaw
all the time. It's so
all the
frustrating.
time. You know,
And
I
if you
got a
think
guy.
that
I got a
if
guy
you
who
think
mows
your
his
child
lawn with
can't
it,
get a
so-
concussion in their particular sport, if you're like, oh, well, my son or daughter plays volleyball, like what? No, I've seen it in every sport, and
You
I've
can-
worked and covered every sport. It can
Anywhere
happen
your jaw
anywhere.
can get an impact, you
That's
can
right.
get a concussion.
And so I'm anxiously awaiting my NeuroGuard Plus mouthguard. I think Dr. Hutchison sending me one in the mail hopefully soon. I've been playing some roller hockey and ice hockey lately with my son, so I'm starting to get a little active again. And the last thing I need right now is a head injury. So anxiously awaiting my NeuroGuard Plus. And I'll let you guys know how it is. I'm sure it's going to be great. Looking forward to it. So
Well, really appreciate taking the time. This has been fun. And you know what? Keep your head in the game. Get
That's right.
NeuroGuard Plus.
There you have it, folks. Dr. Hutchison, once again, thanks for joining us. All the information will be in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please reach out to me, or I'll give you Dr. Hutchison's contact info as well. You're watching the Injured List podcast. This is your host, Brian Scott. Take care.